So we're going to finish up our notes from geometry today. So this is the basics of geometry, and you should have brought home your little waterfall. You should have 12 different tabs, and we're going to start off with just the first tab. You should have already labeled this angles or angle. And I know you might have a little bit less space than I do, but just try to make as much as you can fit on this, okay? So basically the angle that we most commonly see, it's just like that. And I'm going to label mine, so please label yours the way that I do. I'm going to say A, B, and C. And we call this angle, there's the angle sign, A, B, C. And an angle is the intersection of two rays at an endpoint. Okay. The intersection of two rays at an endpoint. Okay. Let's see if we can make this a little bit easier to see. All right, and then the next thing that we should have is right angle. This is on the next tab, right angle, or right angles. So let's open the first tab. So you're looking at right angles. It's the first tab right here. And right angles, we know what those are. We're going to draw a picture. Mine's not perfect, but that's okay. The important thing is that we draw this little box here. This box is what tells us that it is a 90-degree angle. So right angles are angles that measure 90 degrees. And if this is angle A, then we would say the measure of angle A is 90. Okay. Okay, so we're going to go to the next one, next tab. Now this should have been acute angles. Acute angles. So we'll draw a little picture. I'll label mine X, Y, and Z. And these are just angles that measure less than 90. Okay. So an example would be maybe this guy's like 26 degrees. Okay, and we could say the measure of angle X, and then Z, the vertex goes next, X, Z, Y equals 26 degrees. Less than 90, acute angles. Next angles are obtuse angles. Obtuse angles. And we should remember what these look like. These are much larger angles. Let's say this is A, Q, R. And these are angles whose measures are greater than 90. Okay. So they can't be greater than or equal to 90. They have to be greater than 90. Trying to figure out the best way to see this. kind of a challenge. Try one thing. So this angle might be, I don't know, 105. All right. Next we have congruent angles. Congruent angles. Congruent angles. Okay, and congruent angles are just angles. Angles with the same measure. That should make sense since congruent means same, equal. So you got this guy over here measuring 43 degrees. If this is congruent, then that also has to measure 43 degrees. Okay. So we could say angle A is congruent to angle B. Okay. Now, if we want to use the equal symbol, we'd say the measure of angle A is equal to the measure of angle B. So notice we're using, it's different when we use the congruent symbol versus the equal sign. Okay, congruent angles. Next we have adjacent angles. And we should already have these written from class. I'm catching up to you. Adjacent angles. And if two angles are adjacent, it means that they're right next to each other. So adjacent angles share a common ray and vertex. Okay. So if I have A, B, C, and so I have angle ABC, and I have angle CBD, they have the same vertex B, and they share this ray. They share BC. So we could say angle ABC and angle CBD are congruent, or adjacent, I'm sorry. Adjacent, a lot of times we hear side by side. Okay. Adjacent, next thing is vertical angles. Vertical angles. And vertical angles, I like to draw the letters VA because this helps me remember vertical angles, just seeing it visually. So vertical angles, I draw a V and an A. Okay, and this is formed by two lines intersecting, and vertical angles are angles that are opposite from one another. So angles formed, so it's so difficult to read. Angles formed by intersecting lines and they're opposite from one another. Okay. And my lines need to have arrows because otherwise they're line segments. So if this angle is 20, its vertical angle on the opposite side is also 20. So angles formed by intersecting lines, they're opposite from each other, and they also are congruent. That's super important. That also tells us that if this angle is 160, then this opposite angle over here, this vertical angle, is also 160. So I'm going to highlight, so that's a pair of vertical angles. They're across from one another. Okay. Next we have complementary. Complementary. My trick for complementary is complementary starts with a C. So I draw a C, and then I know that I can make the number 90 out of a C. So complementary angles, angles that add to 90 degrees do not have to be adjacent. So what that means is, sure, you could have two angles that look like this that are part of a 90-degree angle. You have this angle right here, let's say that's 20 degrees, and this angle here, that's 70 degrees. But those are adjacent angles. You could have an angle here that's 15 degrees, and another angle here that's 75 degrees, and this pair of angles are still complementary. Okay, we talked about complementary, the next is supplementary. Okay, supplementary, like I remember complementary with a C, supplementary is with an S. Draw a big S. I can turn an S into an H for 180. So angles whose sum is 180 degrees. Again, do not have to be adjacent. So you could have them making a line like this. Let's say this is 10. This angle would be 170. Or they could be non-adjacent. Let's say this is 5 degrees. This angle would have to be 175. Okay, supplementary. Then we have linear pair. A linear pair